Hey there, how there, ho there, Chef Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to another Cutter Top 10 NFL video. And today we're going to be looking at the top 10 NFL tragic deaths in history and all that. We're not trying to glamorize it, we're just trying to say that 10 legendary players and how they died way before their time and all that. Now, usually I do have a ranking system, but because of how much this is a sensitive topic, I'm not going to rank them. Like, I used my source and all that. So here are 10 tragic NFL deaths. And these are all, I believe, active players. Yeah, these are all active players at the time. Um, One of the tragic deaths of a retired player was Reggie White. A couple years after he retired, he passed away, which was shocking. Okay, so here we go. First off, Jerome Brown, number 99 in programs for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's Jerome Brown is why that number is retired with the Eagles. Jerome Brown was a good player for the University of Miami in the 80s and all that. And then he joined the Philadelphia Eagles and became a pretty good sack machine and all that. In 1992, he and his nephew were at their home in which there was a car crash. Now, the problem was there was a crash, and the crashed car actually struck Jerome Brown. It was a shocking move and all that. What's even more sad is that same day as Jerome Brown's death, Reggie White, who was going to be doing a testimonial for a Billy Graham revival thing in Philadelphia, actually passed on the information that Jerome Brown had died. He was legendary for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he was one of the best Eagles around, and he just had to pass away. Sad. Next up, we have Dwayne Hoskins. Dwayne Hoskins was a great quarterback for the University of Ohio State in the 2010s. He was a passing quarterback, which Ohio State rarely saw in their days. They were more of a running game. But Hoskins changed the way Ohio State quarterbacks would go and all that, just like Troy Smith. But the fact is that Dwayne Hoskins was pretty good. He played for Washington and Pittsburgh in the NFL. Unfortunately, though, on my birthday, April 9th in 2022, at age 27, he actually had to get out of he got out of his car to fly for help because his car was breaking out, and then all of a sudden, whammo, some guy plows into him and kills him. It was one of the worst deaths of an active player in history and all that. And it cuts to the bone because, he died April 9th. That's the day I was born. Well, 1985 I was born, but April 9th, but you know what happened. Next up, we have a very sad one, and it was Derek Thomas. Derek Thomas was a great Alabama linebacker in the 1980s, and Kansas City swiped him fifth overall in that famous 1989 draft. You know the draft. Troy Aikman went first overall. Tony Mandarich went second for some damn reason. Then the Sanderses, Barry and Dion went 3-4, and then Derek Thomas was the number 5 pick. So Kansas City got their star player, and in his second season in 1990, he once sacked Dave Craig a whopping 7 times. He actually almost sacked him an eighth time, but that missed sack was huge because Dave Craig put it up in the end zone, and I think it was Paul Scansey who got the touchdown as Seattle beat Kansas City. But the fact of the matter is that Derek Thomas was a pretty good sacks leader and a great linebacker and a community leader in the 1990s in Kansas City. But in 2000, while he was still an active player, he was driving his friends to the airport, and for some reason, his SUV crashed in winter weather. DT did not wear a seatbelt and basically went through the windshield and basically was paralyzed from the waist down. Unfortunately, complications from that led to his death, and it was just shocking that Kansas City had to bury a guy like Derek Thomas. Then you had Ernie Davis, who was actually one of the greatest Heisman Trophy winners not to be in the NFL. But there was only one reason why he wasn't in the NFL as a Heisman Trophy winner. Although you could say Charlie Ward because he was quarterback for FSU, but he became an NBA stand-up for the Knicks. There's a reason. Well, Ernie Davis was a good running back for the University of Syracuse in the vein of Jim Brown. Um, the problem was that, uh, you know, he looked pretty good. He was the Express. They made a movie out of his career. He helped Syracuse win the 1959 national championship, and that was in my second and 10 football tournament. But the fact of the matter is that, unfortunately, he was battling leukemia. He won the Heisman Trophy. He became the first African American player to do so. Not Jim Brown, but Ernie Davis. Washington was ready to receive him with open arms, but he succumbed to leukemia and could not play even one down in the NFL. It was one of the most tragic stories of all time. Then you had Chris Henry in 2009, one of the best Bengals wide receivers of the 2000s, alongside Chad Ochocinco and TJ Houshmandzadeh. But Chris Henry was a different breed. I can't remember what school he went to. I would say Alabama, but I'm probably wrong. I think it was East Carolina or something. Yeah, but yeah, Chris Henry had some personal problems with his girlfriend and all that. It came to a head in 2009 when, in a heated argument with his girlfriend, he actually jumped onto a moving truck and all that and then get thrown off, which was very dangerous and all that and could have killed him. And it did kill him. Chris Henry basically had his domestic violence problems and ended up him dying and all that. Whether you believe that it was karma or whatever, it was just tragic. Then you have Jovan Belcher. In 2012, he was a star Kansas City linebacker and all that in the vein of Derek Thomas. But unfortunately, Belcher made one stupid mistake. He decided to kill his girlfriend, and then at the Kansas City practice facility, he did what was stupid. It will always be stupid. He decided to take his own life, knowing that he killed his girlfriend, and practically, that was not good. Also, you have Corey Stringer. Corey Stringer was a great offensive lineman, number 77 in the programs for the Minnesota Vikings. A great guy on the offensive line of the 98 Vikings that should have went to the World Series, my ass, the Super Bowl, but they fell to Atlanta in that famous Gary Anderson game, as they call it. Unfortunately, though, his death would be a massive message to the NFL. In 2001, during training camp, when the temperature is like 100 Fahrenheit and all that, Minnesota were training, and then Corey Stringer just basically suffered heat stroke. He passed out, and then unfortunately, he couldn't wake up and all that. So Corey Stringer, his being heavy and all that, being an offensive lineman was just terrible. I mean, Minnesota really went into mourning on that one. The worst part about it was that, it was preventable, obviously, through the heat stroke. So the NFL mandated new training camp regimes because, the training camps would happen in July and August, the hottest part of the year, in which they forced NFL teams to do cooling breaks and, more training and more stuff and all that. It reminds you, there was also another training camp death that was huge, and that was J.V. King of the St. Louis Cardinals, back when he was a good tight end and all that, taking over for Jackie Smith. But yeah, J.V. King died in training camp, which was terrible. Then you had Junior Seau, who was a legendary linebacker for both San Diego and New England. Rarely do you see a linebacker icon be feted for being with two franchises. I still kind of say Sale is more of a Chargers icon than a Pats icon, and that's saying somebody wearing the Patriots gear. But the fact of the matter is that Sale was legendary and all that. He helped San Diego out. He helped San Diego shockingly get to Super Bowl 29 against the Niners in 1985. I mean, Sale was just huge. And then he went to the New England Patriots. It was like, wow, we just hit the jackpot. I mean, Mike Vrabel was a good quarterback, linebacker too. But yeah, Junior Seau helped us out. He won a couple of rings with us. And then, in 2012, he was having brain trauma issues, kind of CTE. But then he decided to off himself. But I believe either his family or himself wanted to donate the brain to science and all that. And it's always huge because of the press conference that his mother Louisa did, saying, "I don't know who did this to him, but I'm gonna miss him. Drive home safely," and all that. But yeah, it was just tragic and all that. It was kind of like Dave Duerson. who had CT and all that, the problems, and then, with his moods and all that, and then he shot himself. But then he said that he would donate his brain to cancer to stuff. Also, another terrible death, Pat Tillman. Pat Tillman played for Arizona State, was a great player for the Sun Devils, and then he went to, well, he didn't have to go far because the Arizona Cardinals, at the time, were playing at um, Sun Devil Stadium before they went to State Farm Stadium. Of course, Pat Tillman became a Cardinal, and for a few years he was good. He was one of the best safeties around. Unfortunately, though, 9/11 came, and Pat Tillman became the biggest sports star to decide to go into the Army Rangers. It was like, holy crap! Like an athlete like Pat Tillman joined the military. That's just pure ridiculousness. But he did. Pat Tillman did his job. He left a massive contract and a massive legacy as an Arizona Cardinals player to serve in the military. And in 2004, he died in Afghanistan. Of course, everyone was shocked. Tillman's number was retired both by the Cardinals and by the Sun Devils. Unfortunately, though, weeks later, it was found out that he died by friendly fire, whether it was on purpose or by accident. Pat Tillman's death was very, very preventable. Not because of the whole war angle with Afghanistan, but the fact is that friendly fire. And finally, what I think is what the worst sports NFL death of all time is Sean Taylor. He was a great Washington safety, number 21 in your programs. He was once known for, in 2006 in the Pro Bowl, actually making one of the most massive hits in Pro Bowl history. And that was when the Pro Bowl was an actual football game, when he hit Buffalo punter Brian Moorman heavily. And even the Japanese announcers couldn't help but react to it. But the fact of the matter is that Sean Taylor was just gritty and all that. In the middle of the 2007 season, he was at home in Miami, and then there was a botched home invasion, and then the guy shot him in the leg. Unfortunately, though, it hit the carotid artery or hit some kind of artery, and he died. He bled out. It was just shocking. The same week, Washington was hosting Buffalo in a game and made the decision to start 10 defensive players instead of 11. Normally, that would be kind of a penalty, but the NFL knew that it was in tribute to him. So his safety spot was left open, that nobody was on the field. Unfortunately, Buffalo did get a 50-yard run for that, but Sean Taylor's legacy was still there and all that. It was just shocking to see a guy like that die the way he died and just ruin a legacy. I mean, Sean Taylor would definitely have been the greatest Washington defender of all time. Is he the best defensive player in Washington history? I don't know. Maybe so. But the fact of the matter is that Sean Taylor was an icon and should never have died the way he was. And of course, the other 9 people in this list too. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.